Hi guys, my name is Emily. Some of you might know, some of you might not if you don't know me. I went deafened this year back in 2012. No, I went deafened that year, 2011. I had my surgery in 2012. I just remember being on the bus, going home, and I heard like this little sizzling in my ear. And I was like, that's weird, maybe there's something wrong with this bus. But every time I swallowed, I'd hear the noise. So I was like, So I'd stop swallowing, and the noise wouldn't be there. So I'm like, maybe it's not the bus. Maybe I'm getting an ear infection. I was prone to ear infection since the time I was in kindergarten. I had gotten tubes in kindergarten. That was my first surgery ever. And then they get taken out or they fall out a couple years later. I get off the bus and I'm swallowing as I'm walking home. I still hear it. So I go home and I'm like, you know what, let me wait a day. Sometimes when ear infections form, they take a day to develop. Well, the next day I still had it and the crackling was still there. It just sounded like So I said something's wrong. I made an appointment with my doctor, and the hearing test was kind of like, So I ended up going to different specialists. One of them said that I needed tubes in that ear, because the eardrum was sucked into the canal, and because of that, my hearing wasn't fully there, and then eventually my hearing just stopped. It felt like there was a brick wall, and everybody was talking to me. And I just couldn't tell where anybody was because all I could hear was from my right ear, my left ear. The hearing just wasn't there, it wasn't working. I had to learn compensations. I started stepping to people's left side so I could hear my right ear. I started to learn how to read lips. I got really good at reading lips, really good. I could read people's lips across the room. Now, not so much, just because you'll get to that part of the story later. It kind of sucked, but I knew that it would get fixed with the operation called tubes. So I got tubes put in. I remember going to the doctor and they're like, we said, what's the earliest that I could get this operation? And they had a cancellation for the next day. I believe I got it on a Wednesday. For some reason, I didn't have school that day, so I said, you know what? Let me just get it done. Well, I got that wasn't English. I got the operation done, and I was supposed to get my hearing back right away. But I didn't, and that was a problem. So now I'm kind of panicking, just internally. I'm not really showing it on the outside. I'm like, you know what? Maybe it takes time. I'm trying to calm myself down, I can see that my parents are a little worried, the doctor's a little worried, they don't know why I didn't get my hearing back, so now I'm just deaf in this ear, cannot hear. So I have to go to more specialists. I cannot name how many, the number of specialists that I've been to, too many. So test after test, hearing test after hearing test. They were just trying to figure out what was wrong with my hearing. Why couldn't I hear? The eardrum was not sucked into the canal anymore. The fluid is back to normal. It's not backed up. Nothing is wrong, but why can't I hear? It was an enigma. Nobody knew. So I kept going to specialist after specialist, and one of them thought that I had otosclerosis. Otosclerosis means when you hear, your bone vibrates. My bone stopped vibrating, so I was deaf in this ear. So that was 2 ear problems. It's not uncommon that your ear would get sucked into the canal, so you'd get tubes. That was an easy operation. But otosclerosis, I believe it's like 0.03% of the population has it. I'm a statistic. I don't want to be a statistic in that way. Let me tell you. So I said, what are my options? They said you could get a hearing aid. And if you get a hearing aid, you'd have to get it tuned at least once a month. You'd have to take it on and off, charge it, blah, 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 blah. The whole shebang. Remember, this is back in 2012. Yeah, 2012, because it was after my first operation. That was in February, the first operation. The second surgery that I had was in May, the end of May, and it's May right now, so it's this month, but many, many years ago. I was 14 at the time, so think about this. A 14-year-old girl, deaf in this ear, has major exams. I'm in 9th grade at the time. So I'm sitting in the front of class trying to hear, cannot hear my professor well, can't hear when the classmates start talking about answers, so now I'm struggling to hear. I'm doing as well as I can. I passed all my classes with flying colors, but I had to study just a little bit harder, which is fine. I'm studious. So otosclerosis, right. He goes, get the hearing aid, or you could get a surgery, where it's called a stapendectomy surgery, and they take out your stapes bone and put a prosthetic one in. I was fine with the hearing aid. I could care less if people see a hearing aid. Now they have ones where you can put it in, you won't even know it's there. The time, you could tell that it's there. I said, you know what, it's fine. But he told me when I go to take a shower, I will have to take it out, and I'll have to remember to put it in and charge it and go and get it fixed, and all these things that I really didn't want to do. And I talked to my parents about it, and ultimately it was my decision, but I knew they preferred the surgery just because once I had the surgery, theoretically, it wouldn't change my life. I wouldn't have to think about turning on and off a prosthetic bone like I would for a hearing aid, or I could just wake up and go take a shower and not have to take anything out, just live my life. And every parent wants their kids to have a normal life. I ended up saying okay to the surgery. Now, there was a 1% chance that it would fail. 1% chance, that's really, really minimal. I went to a top doctor, but honestly, kids really don't get it. If you're gonna get otosclerosis, it's in your 20s at least. I was 14, so the doctor only did it on half a dozen kids, and he was a top doctor for this. So I ended up getting a stapendectomy. He said 1% it would fail. If you went in, 7% would be if it was like he couldn't do the surgery, if it was too close to a nerve. So he'd come back out and then I wouldn't have the surgery. 7 plus 1 is 8. So 92% chance of going in and it would be fine. But assuming that the 7% it wasn't near like a nerve, that's 99% chance of it going well. And it's being a success, and I will never have to worry about this prosthetic bone, and I'll be able to hear again. I won't have to have these compensations. I stayed positive. I stayed optimistic. I'm a very optimistic person. Well, I get the surgery, and I come out. And I remember, actually, the first thing I asked was, did my ear bleed? I came out from under anesthesia. Did my ear bleed? I remember they laughed. But my hearing didn't come back. A week later, my hearing didn't come back at all. And so I said, okay. There was like some weird material in my ear that had to be taken out after a week. I'm like, you know what? Maybe when it comes out, I'll be able to hear. No big deal. I don't have my stapes bone anymore. Remember, if I got my hearing aid, I could always get the surgery later. But if I got the surgery, I can't just get the hearing aid because now I don't have that bone anymore. My stapes bone is gone. I also asked to see my stapes bone, but they told me it didn't belong to me anymore, so I never got to see it. That's just a side note. Well, he took it out of my ear, and I still didn't hear. A month goes by. I didn't hear. 2 months go by. I still didn't hear. I was in the 1% category that failed. 99% chance of it succeeding, 1%. That's what they told me. They told me I was in the percentage that failed. My parents were crushed, and I didn't know until later on. I said, you know what? I was upset, but it didn't dictate my life. I'm still the same person even if I cannot hear in my left ear. I can still do everything I want even though I cannot hear in this ear. I didn't change. The only thing that changed is my hearing, and I can live without hearing in one of my ears. And even if it was both of my ears, there are ways, there's sign language, there are all types of communications and technology that can help you. I wasn't going to let it dictate my life, and I didn't. I went to class, I sat in the front, I took really good notes, I talked to friends who took really good notes, and I told you I stood to people's left side so I could hear in my right ear, my better ear, which still isn't great, because once you have otosclerosis in one ear, you have otosclerosis in the other ear, but it might not affect you deaf-wise. I don't know, it's weird. I just remember after the surgery, I was in my school, and I couldn't hear, just brick wall. Someone was talking to me and I didn't know, and they were with somebody else and they were laughing and I didn't know. So I turn and they look at me and they go, did you not hear me? I've been talking to you. And they're hysterical laughing. They go, what are you, deaf? And I think that that was the moment that it hit me. I can easily be positive up here and it won't affect me because I'm still me. But other people are getting affected. They're getting frustrated I don't hear them. Trust me, it's frustrating for me too when I couldn't hear. When you're talking to me and I'm looking right at you, and I can see your mouth moving, but what are the words? You know, a lot of people don't think about it. And so I go, what? And they repeat it, and I say, sorry, what? Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, what? They go, never mind. They get frustrated. And to me, I'm already frustrated. And you saying never mind makes me even more frustrated. So I had to work on that. I couldn't get frustrated with other people for something that they're not used to. And that's fine. They just, when somebody said, are you deaf? That's just such a common expression and you don't think anything about it. It's like when somebody can't see and you're like, what, are you blind? What, are you deaf? Those expressions, they hit you hard. when it's about you. It becomes personal because they don't understand what you're going through, and that's fine. They should never have to understand what you're going through. But you have to figure out how you're going to cope with it. Because if you're going to go through the same situation, why go through it in a negative lighting when you could be positive about it? I'd rather be happy. I'd rather be full of joy. I don't want an experience to dictate how I see things, unless it's a positive thing and I'm growing from it. I think I started to look at the world in a way where you never know what someone's going through. And I'm not saying what I went through is the worst thing in the world. It's really not. It's so easy to deal with when you know how to. It's just other people don't know how to deal with it, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. So when people were laughing and they realized I couldn't hear and they're saying, "Are you deaf?" I just explained that I couldn't hear in that ear. And their whole tone changed. They said, "Oh my God, I didn't know." But that's the thing. In life, you never know. So you should never say anything about anybody. Not just my situation, just any situation. You never know what can upset someone else. My point is, like, just be considerate and sensitive and empathetic to other people. At least sympathetic to other people. But anyway, so 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. All these months are going by and I still can't hear. I'm getting better at reading lips. My friends understand. My family understands. I feel so bad because my mom and dad and my sister will be downstairs and they'll be calling up to me when I'm in my room and I just don't hear. And I'm not responding. So then they run up, think something's wrong, but nothing's wrong. I just can't hear. And so they get used to it. But still they have to make sure that everything's okay. Well, anyway, fast forward, I used to play guitar and I went to music lessons outside of my school. 9 months later, 9 months after my surgery. So keep in mind that the whole sizzling with my eardrum sucked into the canal happened around October, end of October, beginning of November of 2011. February of 2012, I got the first operation. May of 2012, I got my surgery, the main stapendectomy surgery. And then 9 months later from that point, so May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February. So February of the next year. So now we're in 2013. February of 2013, I was having my music lesson, and all of a sudden, that's how it felt. All of a sudden, I heard this noise in my head. The guitar just started blasting, and I looked at my music teacher. I said, "Did you just raise the volume on the amp?" And he said, "No," and that was it. It just went back to normal. Throughout the lesson, I'm like, that was weird, like, what's going on? But I ignored it because I didn't know what it was. And it happened again, and I said, "Are you sure are you messing with me?" And he said, "No." But with sound came tinnitus. Tinnitus is the constant ringing in your ear all day, every day, and that could differ in different ways. So, like, I could hear shh or ee, different frequencies. So have you ever heard the noise in your ear and then you're like, "Oh, what is that?" and it goes away in a minute? Well, I have that all day, every day. My point is, during that lesson, I looked at my teacher and I said, "I think I'm starting to hear again." And he goes, "Okay." He didn't understand. I understood. I was in the 1 percentile that failed, but I didn't fail. For some reason, my body just didn't register it until 9 months later. And how was I supposed to know in that time? But I stayed optimistic. I stayed so optimistic, let me tell you. I hoped that my ear would get better, even though everybody told me it wouldn't. But I think that's like a lesson in life. When people tell you no, if you think it could happen, don't give up hope. Don't just do or say or think what other people want you to believe. Not that they wanted me not to hear, but I think they wanted to be realistic. And I get that. I get that it's a realistic thing. Doctor says it fails. But I had a gut feeling I'd be okay. I knew I'd be okay regardless if I didn't hear in that ear or not. And I heard sound. And with sound came tinnitus. Remember, the constant ringing all day, every day. So I was like, "Ooh, what is that?" And throughout the next few months, I'd just hear noises and I'd be like, "Ooh, what is that?" And it only happened in my left ear. But the sound came back. So now I am 20 decibels below borderline in my left ear right now. And I am borderline in this ear. So this is hearing, not hearing. Middle is borderline. Left ear is 20 decibels below borderline. Right ear is borderline. So my right ear was never that great to begin with. So I was just making do. That's why I figured out all my compensations. I needed to do it for myself because I needed to move forward. I don't want to stay in one place and move backwards in time. In time, you can either move forward, you can move backwards, or you can constantly stay in the same place. I just want to move forward and grow as a person, emotionally, physically, mentally, just everything all together. And I think this really pushed my boundaries. I was 14 at the time. It was the first major life experience thing that happened to me that altered my way of thinking in such a way that I'd look at other people and think I never know their story. Or I could empathize with people who didn't hear. I'd go to restaurants and I'd see people signing in sign language to other people. And at the time, my aunt was studying sign language. She still does. She's amazing at it. And she was very concerned about my ear, still is. Always asks me about it, and that's always really considerate. But I could hear. I cannot explain how much we take for granted our senses. I really took hearing for granted. To say what? 1,000,000 times, even 5 times in a conversation, every other line. We're having conversation, you're trying to have dialogue with me, understand what I'm saying, I'm trying to understand what you're saying. When I say what and you repeat yourself, and I say what and you repeat yourself, and I say what and you say never mind, how is that a conversation? How is that making me feel good? How is that making you feel good? It's not. It's frustrating for both parties. I can tell you it is frustrating. And then I'd say, no, please tell me. And they'd say, forget it, it's not that important. But to me it was, because it was personal to me, not the words that they were saying, but the situation itself. So now I have tinnitus. There is no cure for tinnitus as of now. Yeah, but how do I cope? People always ask me, don't you go crazy from tinnitus? I mean, I've walked through my house and I thought my sister was taking a shower, but really it was my tinnitus because that was the frequency it was at the moment. When people are raising their voice, it doesn't matter where I am. The tinnitus goes up. It gets louder. Why? I have no idea. Do doctors know? Not too sure. No cure. There are theories like apple cider vinegar, but it made my teeth sensitive at some point, so I just kind of stopped doing that, and it didn't really help me at all. This is the best way I could explain tinnitus and how it feels and what it's like. So you're in the train station, and you're waiting for the train. You're on a phone call, and you can hear the other person. Now, they're talking, and you're listening. You could hear them. But all of a sudden, the train starts going by, and it's really, really loud. But the person stays the same on the phone, but now you're trying to hear a little better. You can't hear them as well because there's an outside noise that got louder than that. So what I'm trying to say is, I remember I was taking a test in high school, and the tinnitus was just, it was so loud. And I remember taking the test, and I finished the test early, and I said to the teacher, it was just quiet, so all I heard was the tinnitus. I couldn't concentrate. So I finished my test, and I said, hey, my tinnitus is really loud. Can I please step outside of the classroom? Maybe it was a little noisier. Because when there's noise around me, the tinnitus seems like it's not as loud. Just like when the train is passing by, the person on the phone never changed their volume, but it seems like they're lower than they were previously, but they're really not. He said no. So I'm sitting there like this. The tinnitus is going in my head, in my ear, and it's just driving me crazy. And I'm sitting there, just the time wasn't moving. I'm staring at the clock. I'm staring at my watch. I'm going, please, no, cannot leave. But when other people are around me and we're outside and there's wind and there's other things and there's cars and there's people talking, the tinnitus isn't as bad. It's pretty bad, but it's not as bad. Going to sleep at first, I remember when the tinnitus hit, I could not fall asleep. All I heard was the ringing, and it was quiet. So it was really, really loud. But as time goes on, those things that were abnormal become normal. It becomes part of your routine, part of who you are. Not hearing became part of who I was. It didn't define me. It is not my identity, but it is a part of me, a part of my story, and a part of how I am now. Experiences put you where you are right now at this exact time. If you didn't go through any of the events in your life, if you knew where you were going to be in the future and you changed the course of your life, you would not be here right now thinking the things that you're doing the things you're doing. But I am me. I am me because of my experiences. I understand a little more about myself and others. It just, you can't let an experience change you negatively. You really can't. I told you, I went through it regardless. So I could either be negative and bitter and let it take over my life, or I can be positive and surround myself with the people that I love and care for and who will accept me for me. You are yourself and you will attract the right people. I completely agree with that. I believe it so much. You see people change and they're not happy with themselves, so how can anybody else be happy with who they are too? I don't know. I just don't get that philosophy of life. But if you are you, you will attract the right people. And I've had my best friend by my side. I've known her since I was 5, you know, my family. I have such a good support system. I have good friends. and they understand. So when people asked me, like, why I couldn't hear them, I just explained, and the people who were meant to be in my life understood. It didn't really affect anything. You know, that part of my life, you get past your experiences regardless. Time is inevitable, you go on, but people don't think that like that. When you're going through an emotional time, it's hard to think logically. I was able to think logically and emotionally at that point in my life and going forward, and that's how I stayed so positive. You don't just dwell. You figure out a way to move past it. You figure out a way to deal. You figure out a way to keep yourself happy, because that's a choice. It's a choice to be happy. It's a feeling, yes, but it's also a choice, and that's what I think. I remember when my sister was in sleepaway camp. That was the first year that I didn't go, so we went to visiting day halfway through, and I overheard my mom talking to one of the other parents. She was saying how guilty she felt about me getting the surgery at first. So this is the year that my hearing was first starting to come back. Remember, I told you it started to come back February of the following year after my first operation. So my hearing was first coming back, and she was saying how guilty she felt because she thought she pushed me into getting the surgery, which wasn't true. Ultimately, it was my decision. They would have supported anything that I did because they support me, and they want me to be happy and me to be comfortable. But she felt really guilty because she thought it failed, and she had pushed me into it, which was not true. But to see how much it affected her, and it affected my family, but I never want her to feel guilt. I don't want anybody to feel guilt, because ultimately, we didn't know what would happen. Maybe the hearing aids wouldn't work. Maybe the surgery wouldn't work. Maybe they both would have worked. The surgery got me to where I am. I could hear borderline. That is good enough. And even if I couldn't, I would deal. I would make do. And I think that's like the lesson of life. You have to figure out how to make do with your situation, move forward, and create a life for yourself that you're just happy with. But, yeah, that's my little story about otosclerosis. Thanks for listening. And, yeah.